I wrote the following essay, The Sources of American Estrangement, for the American Conservative magazine in December of 2023. How does one respond to being made to feel like an unwelcome stranger in one's own country without losing one's bearings and dignity? First, let's review some of the history of that estrangement. 3.5 years ago, urban riots shook this country in a way not seen in over half a century. Yet there was little in the way of any federal response. In 2020, we saw the mandating of lockdowns and vaccines by a bought and paid for public health bureaucracy. Today, we have the ongoing efforts by the Biden administration to jail the former president, as well as hundreds of his supporters implicated in the January 6th riot. We should view these examples not as disparate events, but rather as parts of a comprehensible whole, as components of a message from the permanent state to the population at large. That message is an inversion of the traditional way of understanding how this country is supposed to work. Citizens, once understood to be the true sovereigns of the republic, have been put on notice. The federal government in Washington no longer, in any meaningful sense, belongs to the American people. As the political analyst Michael Anton recently pointed out, the permanent state, or ruling class in this country, has captured everything, run everything, and get their way on everything. And their appetite has grown with the eating. Dissenting from the program simply will not do. And so, the unrelenting, at times menacing message from the permanent state to the people: Washington is ours, not yours. The hold the permanent state and its adepts have on American life, particularly as it pertains to the formulation and conduct of American national security policy, is seemingly unbreakable. What we have ruling Washington is our very own nomenclature, and these elites are currently in the process, now quite far along, of consolidating their grip on public discourse. The very public failures and misdeeds of the permanent state over the past 3.5 years are actually a kind of taunt from them to us. Their message to us amounts to, this is ours, not yours. Consider the following. The architects of the Iraq War and the series of post-9/11 wars, which have killed millions of people worldwide, have not only paid no price, they are continually feted and promoted. The permanent state engaged in an attempted coup d'etat in the run-up to the inauguration of the 45th president, who was falsely accused of colluding with a foreign power to steal the 2016 election. Instead of ending up behind bars, those behind the attempted disenfranchisement of 63 million Americans were rewarded with jobs as well-paid analysts on CNN and MSNBC. One now even teaches for Georgetown University. In 2020, the permanent state once again brazenly interfered in a presidential election, demanding the suppression of a story that would have been highly damaging to the challenger, a longtime ally of the permanent state. The successful suppression of the story helped to lead to the defeat of the sitting president. The story regarding the now incumbent's wayward, drug-addled son and an influence peddling operation, which the permanent state claimed was false, it was the work of the Russians, they said, is some years later shown to be true. Yet we see zero consequences for the members of the permanent state who lied to influence the election by trading on the privilege of their security clearances and the prestige of their offices for political purposes. And then there is the disparity of sentences handed out to the rioters in 2020 and the rioters of January 6th. The former caused $2 billion in damage, at least 25 deaths, and pushed many major American cities into a downward spiral of violence and lawlessness from which they have yet to recover. The latter delayed a vote of the Electoral College by several hours. The only death resulting from violence on January 6th was that of an unarmed rioter shot dead by a Capitol Hill policeman who has since been promoted. The message in all of these cases is the same. Washington is ours, not yours. Those who staff the permanent state, to all appearances, possess an unshakable antipathy toward the people who remain outside of it. Nominally Americans, those who staff the permanent state are really the products of the meritocracy, proud citizens of the Republic of Merit. This republic is borderless. It disdains as quaint and unnecessary the notions of patriotism and community. It is proudly post-Christian and aggressively, even ravenously, anti-family. Membership is conferred by the right degrees, the right clerkships, internships, and employers. But most importantly of all, the real key to membership is holding the right opinions. The array of forces which are aligned against common Americans and against conscientious Americans who object to the permanent state, its projects and wars, and its Soviet-like hold on American institutions are only getting stronger. The Trump interlude between Mr. Obama's second and what is now in effect his third term was the point at which the permanent state disregarded any and all pretenses that it exists to serve American citizens. As became all too clear, it exists to serve itself, while the everyday American drowns in debt, in drugs, in despair. Those who object to the regnant state of affairs are relegated to the category of thought criminals, or worse. In 1978, as the Brezhnev regime and Brezhnev himself were gripped by sclerosis, the Czech dissident Václav Havel penned his famous essay, The Power of the Powerless, with its immortal opening. A specter is haunting Eastern Europe, the specter of what in the West is called dissent. Havel describes a system that has become so ossified politically that there is practically no way for such nonconformity to be implemented within its official structures. In Havel's telling, Soviet hegemony over the countries of Eastern Europe gave rise to a situation where the center of power is identical with the center of truth. The centerpiece of Havel's essay concerns a manager of a fruit and vegetable shop, a greengrocer, who places in his window a sign carrying the Marxist slogan, "Workers of the world, unite." We Americans have, of course, our own signs in the windows, our own quasi-official mantras. Go to any well-to-do neighborhood on the Eastern Seaboard, and you will see on lawns and on shop windows and car bumpers signs that read, "Black Lives Matter," "Love is Love," "Thank you, Dr. Fauci," "Science is real," alongside, of course, the now ubiquitous Ukrainian flag. The messages these signs convey comprise the tapestry of the ideology of the permanent state. The situation here in the United States of 2023 is in some respects darker than the situation that prevailed in Eastern Europe in the late 1970s. After all, a key difference between then and now is that people here aren't being coerced by the state to post their signs. No, such is the pervasiveness of the ideology of the permanent state. They post their signs quite happily and of their own volition. And ideological enforcement and conformity of opinion is, of course, the point. It is how the permanent state shields itself from even the minutest scrutiny. As Havel also notes, ideology offers human beings the illusion of an identity, of dignity, and of morality, while making it easier for them to part with them. Reading Havel in 2023 is jarring, not least because his description of the state of affairs under Eastern European communism 40 plus years ago also quite aptly sums up the state of play under the permanent state. In Havel's words, the regime is captive to its own lies. It must falsify everything. It falsifies the past, it falsifies the present, and it falsifies the future. It falsifies statistics. It pretends not to possess an omnipotent and unprincipled police apparatus. It pretends to respect human rights. It pretends to persecute no one. It pretends to fear nothing. It pretends to pretend nothing. For the human being living under such a regime, it becomes imperative to navigate a way forward, to prepare and seek alternatives to the ruling system. The key, according to Havel, is for people of good conscience to revolt against manipulation. Fortunately, many of the means by which the permanent state manipulate us are not hidden. They are in full view, all about us, on our screens and on our iPhones. And in order to break the permanent state's monopoly on what constitutes truth, dissident Americans would be best advised to simply opt out and withdraw their tacit and overt support from those crassest tools of mass manipulation, including, above all, the two major political parties and network cable and legacy news outlets. Perhaps the best way to defeat or tame the permanent state is not to play its game. The most powerful, indeed perhaps the only tool American dissidents have in their arsenal is their refusal to be manipulated, to, as Havel put it, live within the truth.